New tonight, police have identified a man accused of shooting and killing a woman and injuring a second one early this morning. Authorities believe 26-year-old Johnny Osborne IV shot and killed 25-year-old Asia Grice. Another 25-year-old woman was hurt but is expected to survive. Investigators believe the shooting was targeted. It happened a little before 5 this morning on the 1600 block of 30th Street. That's at the Imperial Apartments complex on O Avenue. Osborne is charged with murder, attempted murder, and non-consensual termination of a pregnancy.
It was May 1st, 2020, just after 3 in the morning in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He shot her dead, murdered Asia Takara Grice, just 25 years old, carrying her baby boy the family already called King. The sound of gunfire broke the night silence inside a small apartment on 30th Street Northwest. By the time police arrived, Asia lay lifeless, and her unborn son was gone with her. And yet, the man who pulled the trigger was not a stranger. He was not a robber or an intruder. He was the man she loved, the father of her child. So the question remains, why? Cedar Rapids, Iowa. A city that wakes up to the hum of factory shifts, the whistle of trains, and the quiet patterns of Midwestern life. On May 1st, 2020, just after 3 a.m., that calm was shattered inside a modest apartment on 30th Street Northwest. Inside those walls, 2 young women were caught in a storm that would end one life, nearly take another, and leave an entire family forever broken. According to the police reports, when officers entered that apartment, the scene was one they would never forget. 25-year-old Asia Takara Grice lay shot to death. She was pregnant, her belly carrying the child she had been so eager to meet. That baby boy was already named King, but King never had a chance to take his first breath. His heartbeat ended the moment his mother's did. Lying nearby was Kiana Smith, Asia's close friend. She had been shot multiple times, bullets tearing through her body in an instant of chaos. Somehow, against all odds, she was alive. Barely. Her survival would later become the voice that carried Asia's last moments into the courtroom, into the news, into the hearts of everyone who demanded to know what had really happened that night. The apartment itself was small, the kind of place that could feel warm with laughter one day and cold with silence the next. When the gunfire stopped, there was no more warmth. Just blood on the walls, the heavy smell of smoke from discharged bullets, and the final breaths of a young woman whose life should have stretched far ahead of her. Officers documented every detail. A young black woman murdered in the early hours of the morning. A child stolen before birth. A second woman bleeding out but refusing to let go. A man on the run leaving behind destruction in the very place that was supposed to be safe. This was not a crime that could be explained away as random. This was intimate. This was personal. It was carried out by someone who knew Asia, someone she had trusted with her heart. And that is what makes it unbearable. But how does a love story between a young black couple in Iowa end with blood on the walls? You are watching Black Girl Lost, where we don't just tell true crime stories, we tell her story. The ones the system tried to erase, the ones the headlines never fully explain. Subscribe to bring more attention to stories that matter, like, if you believe black women deserve protection. Comment your thoughts as you watch. Your voice helps bring justice. Also, download your free ebook titled Red Flags That Save Lives by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Before her name became a headline, before her story was spoken through courtroom walls and candlelight vigils, there was simply Asia. Asia Takara Grice was born on June 28, 1994, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a child who carried both warmth and stubborn determination. She was raised in a family that loved her deeply, surrounded by voices that reminded her she was special, that she mattered, that she had something bright to give the world. Those who knew her best say Asia had a way of making ordinary moments feel alive. She could turn a dull afternoon into laughter. She could lift the mood of a room without effort, and she never hesitated when someone needed help. She had a tender heart, especially for animals. Stray cats, dogs without homes, she always wanted to bring them in, to rescue them, to make sure they were safe. That was who Asia was at her core. protecting, nurturing, choosing compassion even when it was inconvenient. As a teenager, she carried that same spirit through school. She graduated from Metro High School in Cedar Rapids in 2012, walking across that stage with her family cheering her on. For them, it was more than a diploma. It was a promise of the future she could create for herself, and Asia embraced that freedom. She lived life with a free-spirited energy, the kind of young woman who was down to earth but also unafraid to dream. Friends describe her as real, someone who never hid who she was. Family always remained at the center of her life. She was the kind of daughter who called home just to hear her mother's voice, the kind of sister who made sure you felt included, the kind of friend who showed up when others would not. That love only grew when she found out she was expecting. For Asia, pregnancy was not a burden. It was joy, pure joy. She told everyone who would listen about the baby she carried. She called him King. She spoke his name with pride, imagining the boy who would one day run into her arms. That glow her family remembers, that happiness that radiated from her when she talked about her child, is what makes her story so devastating. She was ready to give everything to be a mother. She was planning a life built around her son. So when we remember Asia, it cannot only be about the way she died. It must also be about the way she lived. A young Black woman from Milwaukee who carried kindness like it was second nature, who walked into adulthood determined to love, to nurture, and to be loved in return. Take a moment to say her name in the comments, Asia Takara Grice, because victims deserve to be remembered. But behind her glow of pregnancy, as her belly grew and her dreams of motherhood took shape, cracks in her relationship with Johnny Osborne were widening. Asia's story cannot be told without the man who would later take her life. His name was Johnny Osborne, her boyfriend, the father of her unborn child. To outsiders, their relationship looked like many young couples figuring things out, bound together by affection, by shared laughter, by the anticipation of becoming parents. But beneath those ordinary moments, there were signs of something more complicated. People close to Asia noticed it. The way he sometimes wanted to know where she was at all times. The way arguments would flare up, not just over big issues, but over small, almost meaningless things. That possessiveness, that sharp edge, began to stand out. What started as love also carried a thread of control. Friends of Asia later spoke about the tension that was visible if you looked closely. She would brush it off, make excuses for him, but the weight of it showed. When love carries control, it can feel like walking on glass. You never know which step will cause it to break. For Asia, who was nurturing life inside her, those moments of friction should have been red flags, but this is where the psychology of abusive relationships becomes so painfully clear. Love does not always disappear when warning signs appear. It can become an emotional trap. You tell yourself he will change, you remember the good moments, you cling to hope. You convince yourself to stay because leaving feels harder, or even dangerous. Kiana Smith, Asia's close friend and the woman who would later survive the shooting, described in court how she saw the danger building. She spoke of the tension, of the volatility that seemed to rise when Osborne was around. Her words echoed what so many women have endured, the slow shift from affection to control, from control to fear. Kiana survived to tell that story, but Asia did not. What makes this even more heartbreaking is how deeply Asia wanted her family to work, how much she believed in building a life for her child. It is a reality that many women face. The push and pull between wanting stability for their child and ignoring the voice inside, warning them to walk away. The cultural weight placed on women, especially Black women, to hold things together, to forgive, to stay for the sake of family, often keeps them in situations that turn deadly. As the pregnancy moved forward, Asia's excitement glowed, but behind that glow were fractures. She was in love, but love alone could not shield her from what was coming. Her relationship with Osborne had crossed into dangerous territory, a space where affection and control were tangled too tightly to separate. The night of May 1st, 2020 began like any other for most of Cedar Rapids. The streets were quiet, businesses closed, and families asleep. But inside the apartment on 30th Street Northwest, time was moving toward a moment that would change everything. In the small hours, Johnny Osborn arrived armed. What exactly sparked the confrontation inside those walls may never be fully known, but what is clear is that words turned to anger, and anger turned to violence. It was just after 3 a.m. when the sound of gunfire tore through the stillness of the night. Neighbors who lived in the building later recalled the noise jolting them awake, a sound they would not forget. Inside the apartment, bullets ripped into bodies. Asia, only 25 years old and 7 months pregnant with her son, was struck. The life that was growing inside of her ended instantly with hers. Baby King would never see the world, never cry, never be held in his mother's arms. Her friend, Kiana Smith, who had come to spend the night, was also shot multiple times. Somehow, though bleeding and in shock, she found the strength to hang on. She would become the voice of survival in a room that should have been filled with nothing but silence. It was Kiana who would later describe the chaos, who would relive the nightmare in court so that the truth could not be buried. In those minutes after the shots, there was no undoing what had been done. A young woman's life was gone, a child's future was stolen, a friend's body was shattered, and the man responsible walked away, leaving destruction in his wake. When officers arrived at the apartment that early morning, the air was still heavy with gunpowder and panic. Asia lay lifeless, Kiana clung to what strength she had left, and silence hung over the unborn child who would never breathe. The trail of evidence pointed in one direction, toward the man who had been seen walking away, the man witnesses would later identify. By sunrise, law enforcement had moved quickly. Within hours, Johnny Osborn was in custody. His arrest was swift, but the speed of it did not soften the blow of what he had done. The charges he faced were severe. Prosecutors wasted no time in making it clear that this was not just a murder. It was the violent destruction of 2 lives. Osborn was charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and non-consensual termination of a pregnancy. Each charge carried a weight that reflected the brutality of that night. It was not simply a crime of passion. It was calculated violence that robbed a young woman of her future, robbed a child of his chance at life, and left another woman scarred forever. At the first hearing, the courtroom was tense. Prosecutors laid out the case in stark detail, describing how Osborn had armed himself, entered that apartment, and left devastation behind. They showed the photographs of the scene, images so hard to look at that members of Asia's family wept openly in the gallery. The words brutal and heartless appeared again and again in the filings, painting Osborn not as a man who lost control, but as someone who chose destruction.
The punishment you're getting, you've earned.
That's what the judge had to say after sentencing Johnny Osborn IV for killing his pregnant girlfriend. Osborn pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, attempted murder, and non-consensual termination of a pregnancy. On May 1st, he shot Asia Grice and her friend, Kiana Smith. Grice died, and she was in her second trimester of pregnancy. Osborn was originally charged with first-degree murder. A conviction would have meant life in prison with no parole. He pleaded down, which means he could get out in about 33 years, something the family says they'll take but are not happy about. KCRG TV9's Brian Tabak reports.
I refuse to speak the defendant's name. I will refer to him as a monster. What happened to these two women was incredibly senseless, and we feel as if justice was not served.
Family members of Asia Grice walked into the Linn County courtroom Friday with her remains and that of a child she was carrying. This is the first time they faced her killer and gave victim impact statements about their loss, their grief, and their anger.
Growing up, there's no way in hell that I would have expected my sister would lose her life at 26. It just was, it wasn't a thought. And the fact in which she was murdered is very disturbing.
Kiana Smith lived with the couple. In the days she was planning to kick Osborn out, he killed her friend and shot her multiple times, including in the head.
I got a new home. A few months later, I got a job that I fell in love with while still healing physically and mentally. I moved my son back in finally after feeling confident enough that he would be safe with me again.
Maureen Watson lost her daughter. She lost her future grandchild. She says this sentencing marks the end of her grieving.
I refuse to waste any more tears or let Mr. Osborne have that power. I won't do it. So, today is a good day for me.
Osborne took a plea deal not long before his first-degree murder trial was set to start. Dropping from first-degree murder to second-degree murder is not something the family wanted, but it guarantees he'll spend decades in prison.
I do believe if we would have proceeded with the first degree and went to trial, had he not accepted the plea, we probably would have lost Asia and King. So I am willing to accept what we were given, and no, it is not what we wanted.
To Asia's family, it was betrayal wrapped in legal language. They asked themselves over and over, how does a man execute such brutality and still find a door cracked open for the possibility of freedom? For her parents, siblings, cousins, and friends, the answer was clear. It was not justice. Standing outside the courthouse, Asia's mother whispered through tears, "That is not justice for Asia. She deserved more than this deal, more than this compromise." Those words echoed the feelings of many in the community who had gathered to support the family. This moment revealed something bigger than one case. Across America, Black women's murders are too often minimized in courtrooms. Deals are struck, charges are reduced, sentences are negotiated down, their lives are written off as less valuable by systems that fail to measure the depth of their humanity. And so the family's outrage was not only for Asia, but for every woman like her whose life was cut short and whose worth was weighed and discounted in the balance of legal strategy. In the stillness of that sentencing, as the gavel struck and Osborne was led away, Asia's loved ones carried both grief and fury. They knew that 50 years on paper might sound like justice to some, but for them it was an open wound that could never close. Their daughter, their sister, their friend would never return, while the man responsible still had a chance, however distant, at walking free again. In every case like this, the most powerful voice often belongs to the one who lived to tell the story. And now, to every person listening, we ask you to honor Asia and the baby she never got to meet. Drop a candle emoji in the comments for Asia and Baby King. Let her family know the world remembers. Let them feel that even if the system has faltered, the people have not forgotten. But this leaves us with the question that lingers heavy. How do you heal when the system does not deliver full justice? Asia's story, heartbreaking and singular, reflects a much larger pattern in this country. Across the United States, Black women are 3 times more likely to be killed by intimate partners than women of other racial groups. These are not abstract statistics. They are lives like Asia's, full of hope, love, and dreams, cut short by those who claim to care most. The same dynamics that played out in her apartment, the control, the escalation, the warning signs, are part of a recurring tragedy that the system repeatedly fails to stop. Experts point to systemic neglect at every level. Law enforcement responses can be slow, restraining orders often insufficient, and community resources too limited. Many Black women report being dismissed when they seek help, being told the abuse is private, or being shamed into staying. Warning signs that might have prevented Asia's death were there, documented by friends and family, yet the protection she deserved never fully arrived. This is a story repeated quietly in homes across America, in neighborhoods that look ordinary, in families that love deeply, and in lives that are invisible until tragedy strikes. Within communities, silence around domestic violence carries its own weight. Cultural pressures, the desire to protect family reputations, and the fear of appearing weak can prevent women from speaking up. Survivors often endure alone, balancing loyalty and fear, hoping the danger will pass. Asia lived in that tension. She loved deeply, she hoped for the best, and she planned a future with a man she believed she could trust. That trust became the stage for her last moments, and the silence around it became part of a larger social pattern that allows these tragedies to continue. Layered over Asia's story are expert voices, statistics, and research, each echoing the same truth. This is not an isolated incident. It is part of a systemic failure to protect Black women from intimate partner violence, a failure that allows perpetrators to act with impunity while survivors navigate impossible choices every day. Her loss is personal, but it is also political, a reflection of how society values or fails to value the lives of Black women and their children. If justice for Asia was partial, what does that mean for countless others? Share this video to keep Asia and Baby King's names alive. Because silence kills, but remembrance saves lives. Asia Takara Grice was more than a tragic headline. She was a daughter who cherished her family, a friend who brought laughter and light into every room, a woman filled with dreams for herself and the child she carried. Her life was vibrant, full of promise, and the weight of her absence is felt deeply in every corner of Cedar Rapids and beyond. Yet even in death, her presence lingers, echoing through the hearts of those who loved her, through the stories told at vigils, through every act of remembrance that refuses to let her vanish.
Of us is missing.
A vigil held tonight to remember Asia Grice. The Cedar Rapids woman was shot and killed 1 year ago today. She was pregnant when it happened. Police arresting her boyfriend, Johnny Osborne IV, charging him with first-degree murder and non-consensual termination of pregnancy. Kiona Smith was also shot during the incident but survived. TV9's Brian Tabak spoke to the family at tonight's vigil and joins us with what they had to say.
Yeah, Phil, Kiana Smith and her family say this has been a long year without their daughter, sister, and friend. Today is a day to honor her life and celebrate Kiana's.
Lord, we just thank you, God. We thank you.
Led in prayer and lit candles, the family and friends of Asia Grice are taking a moment to remember the 25-year-old woman.
Why would you do this? Like, why? I just want to know why. What made you pull the trigger? Out of all the things you could have done, you decided to pull a gun.
On the way here, that was the same route I took when I got the news. And every time I go past Old Avenue, it's hard.
Victoria McDaniel is Grice's sister, and Melvin and Maureen Watson are her parents. They say Grice didn't know Johnny more than a few months, but say this shows just how dangerous domestic violence can be.
Johnny was very controlling. You can tell because her actions started to change.
Those thoughts never go away. They're with me every single day. I am now taking sleeping pills because I can't sleep through the night because I'm so worried about it happening again.
Kiana Smith lived in the apartment where Grice and Osborne were staying. Police say Osborne also shot Smith, but she believes more people are involved in the shooting that killed her friend and almost herself.
Justice won't be served until everybody that had a hand in this is dealt with.
A police search warrant affidavit shows others did play a role in what happened, but yet to face charges. Police say they can't comment on an active investigation and if more people are being investigated. But Saturday night is to honor the bright life of Asia, who was taken too soon.
The light in every single room, the light in everybody's life. She would have been the best mom. She was already the greatest aunt, greatest godmom to my son. She was everything.
Her name carries power. It is a call to witness, a call to honor, a call to demand justice. Every candle lit, every shared post, every whispered remembrance reinforces that a life stolen cannot be erased from memory. Her story compels us to confront the systems that fail Black women, to push for reforms in sentencing, to insist on accountability for domestic violence before it claims another life. Her legacy is a reminder that we must act while we still can, to protect those who cannot yet speak for themselves. To the audience, to the community, to the world, remember Asia, share her story, speak her name, subscribe, comment, like, and share so that her memory remains alive and her voice continues to resonate. He thought he could erase her, but we will not let Asia Grice be forgotten. Lastly, download your free ebook titled Red Flags That Save Lives by clicking the link in the pinned comment.